Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I've got another great solo author show planned for you today. This one we actually planned in advance for, which is really exciting. So without any further delay, let me introduce the episode. Today's guest is a celebrated author and business communication trainer who has authored multiple publications that have sold over 50,000 copies, been translated into 15 languages, and earned recognition from readers and industry experts alike. With years of experience working in senior roles with some of the world's largest companies, he's on a mission to close the communication gap between technical and business professionals. Drawing on his personal journey of transforming frustration into mastery, he teaches practical methods that help individuals and teams improve their communication skills, unlock career opportunities, and reduce daily communication stress. Through his books, coaching, and corporate training, he empowers his clients to convey their messages more clearly and confidently. Whether crafting compelling emails, delivering concise updates, or connecting with readers, his expertise helps bridge the gap between great ideas and effective communication. Please join me in welcoming Chris Fenning. Chris, welcome.
Oh, Robbie, what an introduction. Gosh,
No,
thank you so much.
you want to hear this episode. You're like, I want to listen to this.
Yeah, like, who is that guy?
We'll dive right into this, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, Chris, you've authored quite a few different books, as I mentioned. The one I think probably is your breakout success was The First Minute: How to Start Conversations That Get Results. But you didn't stop there. You solved some of the most sort of sticky problems in a workplace. I'm curious where you started, because you didn't start being an author. How long were you already in this work and establishing yourself as a person who was credible in this work before you thought about, the first inklings of writing books?
Well, and I don't think anyone's asked me this before, so this may be sort of breaking news for people who aren't really familiar with me. I did the book first. In my journey as an independent trainer, author, instructor, the first thing I produced was the book. Now, if I can take 30 seconds, I can give a little bit of backstory, because it was just a bit before the book, but the book was the first thing I did solo. Prior to that, in my employed life, I was teaching the stuff that's in The First Minute and a lot of the other things that I now teach. But I was teaching them to my teams, to other teams in my department, to other departments in my company. And having done that, I gained confidence in the topic, I gained confidence in myself to take that plunge into going solo. And at that point, I started with the book.
I have heard this happen before. I feel like you've done it so beautifully, so beautifully that I didn't even realize that that was the case. But Dory Clark, whom you and I both know, often talks about, like, while employed, what is the thing you can do to sort of build up the side hustle, build up the credibility so you can make the leap to being self-employed. And you had all this credibility in this space. You had been doing the work. And I'm curious how you came to the decision to write a book on this topic. Did you know other authors? Did you know other entrepreneurs? Like, why was this the pathway that seems the most like, yeah, that's the path I should go down when
Yeah, because
it's
starting with a
daunting?
book, starting with a book that's kind of a lot of work, right? It's not the obvious starting point, because books are hard to write. Even when they're easy, there's still a lot of work. And don't let anyone tell you can write an entire book in a day and it'll be great. It takes more work than that. So why did I start with the book? Well, when I made the conscious choice to transition from being employed to being self-employed, I had a very, very important realization that was helped by mentors at the time. And I was told, Chris, you're starting a new job in a new career in a new way. You don't know how to do this job. So the first thing I had to learn was how to do my new job. If I'm stepping out of an employed environment and stepping into running my own business as whether it's an entrepreneur, an author, instructor, entrepreneur, whatever you pick, I realized I had a big gap in my ability and my knowledge to do that job. And so I made in hindsight, a very important decision, which was, I said, I will spend 1 year learning how to do my new job. And so I found people who were being successful as independent, expert-based businesses. I took courses, I read books, I found Dory among other people. And there were a few things that were consistent across all of the messages, across all of those people, even from those who gave sort of bro marketing advice, like the sort of, let me stand in front of my Lamborghini, you can get super rich in a week, all the way to sensible advice from people like Dory. There was a common thread, which was, if you want to have credibility, you need to have a book. And it's the new sort of lowest bar for credibility, to get on the speaking stage, to be able to sell something, to give it away as something that's better than a business card. And because it was a common thread, well, there's got to be something in this. And so I decided that's where I was going to start, because I happened to have a bit of spare time while I was traveling and moving countries, because they're obviously low time intensity events. But I did have some spare time, and it was COVID as well, so everyone was writing their COVID book at that point, because no one was as you well know, no one was doing in-person events and training anymore. And so that's why I started with the book. It was time, it was advice, it was something that seemed to be one of the most consistently stated things that we needed to do. So that's where I started.
So this year that you took, was this after your employment ended?
It was, yes. In December of 2019, my wife and I made a big choice. We had a 3-year-old, and she was going to start going to school soon. And we said, you know what? We want to leave America, move back to Europe to be with our families as our parents got older, and to help our daughter have an experience with her grandparents. We said, but before she goes to school, let's travel the world for a year. So we quit our jobs, we sold our house, and then COVID, which, I mean, this is, so many people were affected by that, that this is just one of many, many stories out there in the world. But those plans got turned a little bit upside down, and we ended up going through all of the lockdowns without a home, bouncing around between sort of last minute scrape together rentals. But in that year, we still had the time where I could write the book.
Wow. I mean, I've heard a lot of disruptions that have happened to people in March 2020, but the idea that you as a family made a decision to sell the home and go travel for a year before moving to Europe and then be grounded, 3 months later.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Like,
it breaks my wife's heart. It really does. I'm a little more robust on it, but it's still,
yeah, what a big decision. I do know people who travel with kids. I don't want to, so I can't give you any advice on it. But I accidentally wrote 2 books during the pandemic, and I found out that I had done that when I was being introduced to do a talk on Zoom, and they didn't read my usual intro. They were doing their own little shtick, and then they were like, "And he wrote 2 books during the pandemic," and I was like, "I did?" I was like,
yeah.
What? Yeah, they were 17 months apart. Yeah, and it wasn't really like planned, but I could see why, everything was a little different. You had some space, and you had heard this message. I love the idea that everything from bro marketing to Dory Clark was saying like a book. It's just true. But I also think there's a difference between a book in the most basic form, a book where you just write the content and you hit publish. I mean, you could string together 20 blog posts, right, and produce a book, versus a really quality, well thought out, well strategically written book that has a specific audience, that has a marketing plan. And you hinted at something a moment ago that I think is the reason why you do so well. You are fastidious, studious. I don't know. You remind me of Dory Clark. Actually, you're both very willing to be like, I have a curiosity about this thing, and I'm gonna go learn about it. Her role on that would be interview 50 people and create a new book, because she wants to learn something. But I could see how you were like, I'm gonna spend this year and really learn something about this whole new work that I'm supposed to be doing, because it is different when you're doing the sales and doing the marketing and you're doing the client work.
When you're wearing every
single hat. In the beginning, you don't have money to hire out either, and you don't even know what kind of support you need. I've joked, and I think I even said it to you, that in the beginning, creating content is your job. So the idea of hiring someone to do it is like, why would I do? That's my job.
Oh
like, no,
yeah.
it's not your job. Your job is to do your client work. But I love that you fell into a world of entrepreneurs and you got this advice and you did the plan. But what were the original goals for the book? I mean, if I'm looking here, you have a workbook, the first minute workbook. Then you wrote a book, Effective Emails, The Secret to Straightforward Communication at Work. Those are both smaller, right? The first minute, which is the bigger project. And then even after that, you also wrote 39 ways to make training stick.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, because you were like, why not? But
Well, that was an accidental book, but we can talk about
I totally
that
know what you
later.
mean by that, by the way. But how did you approach the first minute book, and is it different from how you approach the first two things? Like, did you learn
Yeah.
something about producing the first two that changed what your goals were? Like, how did you know what metrics to even measure for like the success of the first minute?
Yeah. So I've got to say this up front. I and my wife will disagree with me, but I believe I got incredibly lucky because the first minute was the first business book I wrote. I actually wrote another book 10 years ago on a completely different topic about indoor rifle shooting. I used to do that in a previous life. So I'd written a book before. So I had the confidence that I could write a book, and it was traditionally published. And I'd gone through the process of writing a manuscript, going through the editing, doing all that sort of stuff. So that I'd already got a reasonable confidence that I could write a book or another book, but I hadn't done anything on business communication as a topic. And the first minute it's my flagship book. It's the thing I'm most known for. And when I wrote it, I learned a ton of stuff. I do it differently now. I market differently now, but I got a topic that really resonates, and the way like the end product has just taken off, and that has I've been incredibly lucky. Now my wife would say I created that luck, and I put the effort in, and I picked the topic, and I wrote a good book, and so I can't put it all down to luck, and she is right. But the original intent versus how I use it now are different. The way I wrote it and how I wrote now are different. The way I marketed it, or planned or didn't plan to market it actually, and what I do now are all completely different.
I want to stay with what you originally did then, because I think you've learned a lot and you've changed your approach. But what were the initial things you were thinking about? Like, did you care about
Yeah.
bestseller status on Amazon? Were you aiming for New York
Oh
Times?
no.
Any of those things?
No, all of that was just a pipe dream. I thought I was writing a fancy business card that I would print 500 copies of, give away in the hope of getting introductions and conversations with decision makers in business who would hire me to train. So I had the intention of using the book as a marketing tool in my business. I did not expect to make money off the book. I didn't. It was always that little bit of hope, wouldn't it be nice? But I just did not expect it. My expectation was the time, effort, the money, the investment would all turn it into a high value business card.
Meaning leading to work like speaking, coaching, consulting.
Speaking, coaching, corporate training, leading to events where you get paid thousands for the event rather than being paid in royalties, $5 for the book.
Right.
So I hadn't really expected to sell more than a couple of hundred to friends and families and things like that.
Wait. So you're saying you're making money from sales of the book itself?
I make a living from royalties on the first minute alone. Yeah.
All right, we definitely have to talk about this.
Okay.
Because I caution people against this. It is amazing that you're doing this. It's partly why I wanted you on the show. I knew this
It
was
is
coming.
rare.
It is
And it was
rare though.
unexpected.
It's very rare.
Yeah.
Usually it's people who have written a lot of books, like fiction authors who've just produced, 2 a year or 3 books a year. They're churning them out. They have a whole series. That, yes, it's possible, but it's hard to do on a singular book that becomes your signature book. So what shifted between you originally thinking this was going to like leverage you into sales conversations for all the other stuff you do versus the book itself becoming the product that's selling?
What changed was a podcast that I listened to, and I've gone back through my notes multiple times. I just can't find the name of the person who was being interviewed or even the show. But there was a podcast where somebody who had been successful in the business world, in the entrepreneurship world, had decided they were going to write a book. And their approach was, a book is a 3-year commitment to marketing. And that stopped me cold, because everything I'd seen were sort of centered around, do a great launch, sell as many as you can, and expect it to just drop off to nothing. And you'll sell a couple of copies a month if you're lucky. Like, everything's in that first few months. And this person was saying that's not true. And they said the amount of time and effort and money up front, they couldn't just expect this to focus on for a couple of months and move on to something else. So they had a 3-year plan. And that changed my approach to book marketing. I started following a 3-year plan. Apologies. I had a 3-year plan, and every one of my books now has a 1,000-day marketing plan. And one of the best things about this is it takes the pressure off, because I don't care how many books sell on day one. It's nice. I love that launch spike. It's always nice to get the bestseller flag, but that disappears. It's always nice to sell a few copies. But I don't actually care how many I sell on day one. What I care about is, am I selling half to 1 book a day more 3 months later? And am I selling half to 1 book a day more 3 months after that? Because if I can keep building momentum at half to 1 book a day, then after a couple of years, I'm selling quite a few more books per day. And if I can stack up a book that earns me, even if it earns me $30 or $50 a day, well, if I have 5 of those books, I'm earning a 6-figure income.
Wow. So have you applied this for the books you currently have?
Yes.
All of them, not just the first minute?
All of them.
Okay. So what are some of the things that are happening in year 1 versus year 2 and 3? Like, what shifts as you extend away from the book's publication date?
This may surprise you. Nothing. Nothing shifts in the strategy. The 3-year marketing strategy is for the 1,000 days for me. It's not a deliberately laid out every step, every day I know what I'm doing. It's 1,000 days of experimenting to see what works for this book at this time. And I run short experiments. I run 30 to 100 days for somewhere between $100 and $500 is what I'm willing to spend on an experiment to test adverts, to test paying influencers to market a book. Generally not a great successful thing, by the way, but always worth a try, because sometimes it can really pay off. Can I do library advertising? Can I invest on getting on some high-profile podcasts? Do I invest the time in getting on a lot of smaller podcasts with the right audiences? Do I do a bulk book outreach to certain industries? Is it worth finding small shops or small outlets that are focused on my topic and seeing if they're interested in buying 10 to 15 copies and contacting 50 of them to see how many of those can stack up? Lots of experiments to find the things that work for this book at this time. And then when they work, I carry on doing them, or I tweak them, or I get them to a steady state and then just let them run, or I see if I can improve them. All about experimenting. And then after 3 years, there should be enough word of mouth momentum. If your book is a good book, and if there's an appetite for it, there should be enough word of mouth momentum that you can stop paying for a lot of things, and that word of mouth generates more sales.
You know, I feel a lot of times when people are writing books, the first instinct is that it's going to be a business book, like it's a necessary, thing for their credibility, for their branding, but they don't leave space for the success of the book. So even if the book does well, they don't have time to do the follow-up, the marketing, like all the things that come next. They've already got their calendar filled with other activities, so they can't make space. And I just happened to talk to someone whose interview's coming out later in the season who did create space, but she said, and it was Kate Colbert, who's coming out in like a few weeks from now. She said that for her, when she wrote her second book, she said she wanted to be career defining. And by going in with the career defining mindset, that changed her commitment to what came next. And there
Yeah.
was lots that came next that she couldn't have planned for. Like there were certain things she did plan for. She happens to be a marketing expert, so she has that background. But there was a lot that came up that was unexpected, but she
Yeah.
had the space to ascertain, like, does this seem like a good idea? Let me try it. Let me test it. And I feel like you're creating space for 3 years, for 1,000 days to always be in not just always marketing, but always testing. I mean, the joke
Yeah.
is like, can I stop talking about my book now? Sure, if you don't want any more sales.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
fine. That's
Oh, at the beginning when I was when it was sort of the write a book, write a book, write a book, somebody said, don't write a book that you think will sell. Write a book that you want to talk about for 10 years because you're going to talk about it for 10 years. And I talk with a lot of authors, and I love helping people get started. And there's so many different ways to succeed and fail in this business. And when people say, "Well, I just, I want to write this book. It's not really what I'm passionate about," then don't write it. Because if you don't want to talk about it, then it's why are you investing that much time, effort, and money in something that's not, if it's not critical to your business and you want to talk about it, then you're really just hoping it's going to make a bunch of money without any effort, and that's incredibly rare.
incredibly rare and naive. I mean, it just feels like it follows
Yeah.
all the it's like it's just the worst advice, that people sort of follow. They look for the shortcuts. My first book came out in July of 2017. And just a couple of months ago, I got booked for my highest paying virtual training for a global company. I don't talk about the book all the time. It's just like one of the things I'm known for is networking. And this company came across my name. Someone referred me, and I got a chance to speak to 6 different offices around the world,
Okay.
and do a presentation. And it was because they went to my website, and I have it all front and center. Like, it's not buried. Like, even though the book is, I
Yeah.
don't know, years and years and years ago, it's right there.
Yeah.
It's not the thing I lead with anymore, but I'm also always looking for opportunities to refer to it. But I feel like my second book I refer to even more often, right? Because it's a book about entrepreneurship. You followed the book in Smallest Big Results,
Yep.
and were able to get great ideas from it. So it's funny how you're right. Like, don't write something that you don't want to always be talking about. I
Oh
partly
yeah.
think I wrote these books because I can say to someone, "Oh, you know what? Why don't you read this? And then let me know if you have any questions." And that way I don't have to have the 30-minute call.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I
And it's
give
a
you
great
lots.
giveaway. It's a great giveaway
Great
because it
giveaway.
also helps people self-select in or out. Um, uh, in terms of it being useful for the business and sort of guiding people towards it, I reckon it's about every 1,500 copies of my book that I sell, a big company or a person will come and approach me for a training or a coaching or a high value thing. So it's low cost marketing.
Mhm.
And you asked earlier as to why I invest time in doing these things with books in the long term, is because I realized that if I sell, it used to be 1,000 copies, but now the book's doing better. A lot more people who aren't decision makers are reading the book, so the numbers have actually slowed down. But I'm selling more of them, so it still works out about the same number of inquiries. But between 1,000 and 1,500 copies of the book sold means somebody approaches me and offers me a higher value amount of money to come and do a big training event. Well, I don't like selling. So I put a lot of time and effort into avoiding proactive sales stuff, but I could sell books all day long. So in my desire to avoid selling because I was scared of it and didn't feel comfortable, I double and tripled down on marketing books, and I saw a return in that. But it was a long game. There is no way that I've seen with anybody who doesn't have an audience of 300,000 already. If it's a normal person with a normal network writing a book, there is no shortcut to selling thousands of books. It is time and effort and grind and test and adjust. And over time, those numbers will go up.
I feel like you just answered the question I had in my head, which is, well, why don't more people do this? Um, I think people going into the book process are short-sighted about what the book can mean for them and they just want to get to the finish line, which in their mind is the publication date.
That's the
And
beginning. That's the start line.
yeah, it's the very last day to enact a marketing plan is the way I tell people. But if they work with a hybrid publisher, most of them, and traditional publishers, most of them, they're going to be really solely focused on the release date, the publication date, and they're going to be under intense pressure to get everything right for that date. Pre-sales have to be done right. You have to get into all these different bookstores. You have to, right? And all these different things, nothing about, by the way, reviews other than telling the author they should have some.
50, get to 50 as quickly as you can.
It's really hard. And then they get stressed out because they're like, all this has to happen right now. And then they burn out. And then 6 months later, they're really not doing anything with their book. So there is like, I've said it's less of a marathon and more of a triathlon. Like you just finished the swim.
I like that.
You're dripping wet. You got to run to the bike. You got to go do the bike thing. And then that's the launch. And then when you get all done with that, now you got to go run the marathon. And for some people, it's like a Ironman.
Yeah, it is.
It's even more intense because it's even more work. But you know, a marathon, you run it and you're done. Like that was it. Yeah. Like comparatively, that seems pretty straightforward to this multi-phase, change your brain from writing to marketing.
So good. There's a book in that, like the book triathlon. And it's
I'll be talking about it in my next book. I have my next book already planned out. I'll be working on that book soon, and hopefully that'll be out and shortly after this even gets released. I'm really gung ho about being done this year.
Nice.
Yeah. So more about this. I know I want to get to ads in a second, and which platforms we're talking about. But before we talk about ads, what besides ads? You mentioned working with influencers, which you kind of went like, could kind of work. But what's another thing? Bulk book sales from speaking, I'm guessing. Like it's pretty common.
Yeah, selling at the back of the room. So the things, I'll go through the things I've tried and what's worked for me and what hasn't. And I have to preface this with, there is no solution that is guaranteed to work for anyone. I've heard people have wild success with something that I completely bombed on and didn't get any return at all. And the inverse is true. So your market, your topic, the way the wind is blowing, all these things will affect what works. But I'm happy to share some of the things I've done and give a very quick overview as to what's worked or what's not. So ads is a core part of what I do. It took me a long time to learn and get it right, but paid Amazon ads is a key part of it. I do a lot of guest appearances on podcasts. And at the beginning of my journey with this book, I could see and I could correlate podcast release bump in sales, 5 or 10 books. But when I did 20 podcasts, well, now I'm looking at 100 to 200 books sold. And that's actually a material number of books. It's great, which all leads to word of mouth. Reaching out to companies cold for bulk book sales, not successful. That's terrible networking. It's like spamming in a it's cold email, but in a very expensive way because it costs $20 per pack that you send out. You include a book, you FedEx it out. Very expensive. It does work if you invest in the networking with people first and get them excited about receiving a sample of your book. That is more successful. But just cold, like sending out books, I don't advise doing that. It certainly didn't work for me. I've tried speaking at various local associations, which leads to selling from the back of the room and selling higher value contracts, which then leads to more book sales as part of those training packages. And then, of course, wrapping in books within corporate training packages, either putting them as an add-on or including them in a higher price so that it works out well for me either way. Other small things that I have tried, I've approached local bookstores, national bookstores. I've done and had interesting, fun experiences with local bookstores and sold, I think, 3 books. So really not worth the time, but it was fun and I met some nice people. National bookstores, forget it. It turns out you have to buy your way into those now, or generally you have to buy your way in either through an agent, through a big distributor, or through one of the big 5.
Have you tried being placed in airports? Because I know that's a whole pay to figure that out.
I'm not willing to spend the $20,000 it costs to get on that shelf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And from the authors I've spoken to who have been on the shelves, break even is a good result.
Yeah.
So I have a target in mind. So it's interesting that you asked that. I have a target in mind that when I hit a certain number of sales overall, and it's going to be when I hit the 250,000, which is a way off. I'll hit 100,000 this year, but when I get to 250,000, I'm going to take a punt on it because you do sell a crazy number of books. And it means I have to trust what I said earlier about sell X number of books, get a good lead, but I'm nervous to put the money down. So I'm setting myself a target that my reward, my treat for myself is I will take a punt on that at that point, and see if it does.
Well, you also at that point could republish the cover. 250,000 copies sold, which would also be very impressive in an airport.
It would, and the awards that it's picked up have helped. Oh, that's another thing I try. Getting awards helps. Doing PR, like a press release, but syndicated announcements. I've tried those, paid and unpaid, and I didn't get a good boost for the books. I'm going to focus on this just for a moment. So I launched the book. I got an award, and I happened to be approached by a company that said, "Hey, we'll do PR for you. Get this thing released out there. Only $750, and it'll go to X number of different news outlets and papers and things." And I got all starry-eyed and went, "Oh, that sounds great. I'll give it a try. Take my money." And I think it led to 0 sales. Pretty confident it led to 0 sales, but it was phenomenally helpful for my Google website backlink ranking. And it made a huge difference because I suddenly had news outlets all over the States, all over Europe, pointing back to my website. And that was I believe, a significant contributing factor to getting sort of that person of note thing. When you search for someone on Google, if they have their own bar at the top with photos and info and stuff about them, rather than just coming up with a website, that was a big contributor, along with having a book in lots of bookshops, because those bookshops will backlink to you as well. And those two things give you a really good sort of credibility boost in Google. So paying for PR, I've had no success in selling books, but good.
I mean, it's related to the topic, which is ultimately increasing revenue in your bank account. So it's a question of cost versus the outcome. And it sounds like something like that, because of the backlinks, because you can then say quoted in or, referenced in all these different places, it will quickly boost someone's visibility.
Yes, do it for that. I wouldn't expect to sell books. And talking to other authors, anecdotally, no one's seen a big return on those things.
Related, I have a friend who was on the Today Show, and she's now, I think, been on it twice. She says not a single book gets sold, but she gets great clips that she puts on her website and on social media. And so
brand name,
the branding is awesome, but she definitely thought going in, because they invited her because of her book, that it was going to turn into thousands of book sales. And there's just, it's something about the same issue, by the way, with podcasts. I'm amazed you get 5 or 10 books for every show, because people have to be listening and then decide to go switch to picking up a phone or going to a computer and, going to buy something. And they have to remember the links, they have to remember the name of something. And same thing with TV. It's just not the same thing as it being right in front of you in an email. But it does have, the boost of the branding. So that's all really great.
Extra benefits. Now, the Today Show one, I've heard a lot of people. I say a lot. I've heard probably 5 people. So not a lot, but 5 people who've been on the Today Show. They've been on CNBC as an expert talking about the book. The book is on the screen with them. And I think it's a wonderful, practical example of focusing on an audience and how that matters. The Today Show, it goes to every person. It doesn't go to your ideal client or your ideal reader. Whereas if you wrote a book on Cocker Spaniel behavior problems, you're going to go, if you go on a Cocker Spaniel podcast, your audience
We
is
totally
going
won't.
to be the right people.
Mm.
Whereas if you go on the Every Dog podcast, only a small portion of that audience is going to care about your book. So
You go
even
on a
though it's
cat
a dog,
audience, it's gonna be totally. They don't
oh
care
yeah,
at all.
pets, and it turns out most of their audience have budgies or cats or llamas or
Right.
whatever. Get really specific in your niche. And I have no problem going on a podcast that only has 50 listeners or a new podcast, because one, there's a chance that podcast will get bigger, and again, another thing is it's another backlink. But if there are 50 people on a podcast that is specific to my topic, those people have a problem they're looking for a solution for. And if I'm in their ear, there's a trust building.
I don't want to let you get off this call before asking you something that I'm hoping, if you don't have this right in front of you, you can share it with me after and I'll put it in the show notes. But you helped guide me through Amazon ads, and I did some testing, and I feel like I want to go through this process again and play around with a little bit more. But you made this observation that I had not fully understood, which was around the number of units you need to sell, and then factoring in how much you actually get back from the royalty. And there was like a math problem, which I wrote down very carefully somewhere. And so for all the listeners out there, I wanted to like have you just talk us through, because I think ads are a thing, and Amazon ads, from everything I've heard, are better than, let's say Facebook ads or Google ads. Like Amazon, people are there to buy books, so this is the right place to be. Yep. But you could lose your shirt.
Oh yeah.
I
you can.
Someone a lot of money a month to quote unquote manage my ads for a year when they did nothing other than set them up with, like, I don't know, 1,000 keywords that were just stuffed in.
I remember your ads. That person got paid to do very bad work.
Yeah,
we're not going to mention the organization's name, but they did a
they left me feeling like this is never going to work for me. And then when I met with you, I was like, oh, there's like a whole scientific approach, and I didn't know enough to even know what questions to ask. So how do we approach this mentally? Like, I'm thinking about doing ads. Like, what questions do you have to ask yourself? What's your book have to be priced at? Because if it's too low, you're never like, I can't do this 99-cent book and make money.
All right. Let's see if I can do this off the top of my head, which I should, because I run my own ads. By the way, I paid someone else to run my ads for a year, and it was great. It gave me time back. And then I began to wonder, was it worth the effort? So I ran an experiment where I managed a different set of ads next to them. And it turned out that I could run my own ads more effectively on 1 hour a month than I could pay them. So I don't pay them anymore. They did a great job, but it wasn't worth the return. So it's, again, experimentation. And when you find something that works, don't just assume it'll work forever. You've got to keep testing. But back to the core question here. Someone says, right, I want to try Amazon ads. The first and most important question is, what do you want to achieve with your ads? And there are 3 options. You want to make money, you want to break even, or you're happy to lose money if it means selling books. And that third option is what we've talked about, where I sell 1,000 books, someone comes and offers me 10,000 for a training program, then I'm willing to take a loss on some of those books because I know I'm going to get a big amount later on. Still a bit of a gamble. But what is the strategy? I want to make money, only want to make money. I'm happy to break even, which means books are in people's hands, people are talking about me, that leads to other things. Or I'm happy to lose a certain amount of money. And when you've answered that question, that changes how you set up your ads and the amount you choose to spend. And the simplest way, let's see if I can keep this simple, having prefaced it with that word, is when you sell a book on Amazon, Amazon will give you a royalty of X amount. Now, let's keep the math simple and say it's $10. You've got to have a pretty highly priced book for it to be $10, but we'll keep the math simple here. You sell a book on Amazon, Amazon takes their cut, they give you $10. That means you can spend $9.99 on advertising the book and still make a profit if the book sells. It's only 1 cent, but technically you're still making a profit. Then if you throw all the money in the world at it, you're going to get that return. So Amazon's going to give you an amount of money back. To sell a book on Amazon, people are clicking on an advert. And a certain number of clicks equals a sale. Now, a great number would be 5 people click on your ad and a book sells. That's epic. More likely, 25 people click on an ad and 1 book sells. Every time someone clicks on your ad, you spend money. So if you're going to make $10 from a book sale and it's going to take 25 clicks, you cannot spend more than 40 cents per click in the bidding system. You can't spend more than 40 cents per click and make a profit. So if your goal is to make a profit, you're going to make £10, $10 per book sale, and it's 25 clicks per sale, 40 cents is your maximum bid.
All right, let me see if I can break this down in my head, make it make sense. I like that you're using easy math. First, find out what your royalty is per book. So, even a $9.99 book is 70%, right? Like you could find out what that dollar amount is.
On an ebook, yes.
On an ebook. So, or let's say it's $19.99, it's 70%. So now we're talking how much money there?
So on a print book at $19.99, you'll make maybe call it $7.
Okay.
And on a $9.99 ebook, you'll make $7 because the Amazon
they're kind of the
royalties
same.
are different.
So basically, you have that amount, and then at first you conservatively 25 clicks equals a sale. It might turn out to be more like 15 or 20, but you're saying mathematically to start with, to conservatively plan for 25 clicks.
Yeah.
And then it's a question of, well, do you want to make money, break even, or lose money? So you take the dollar that you'll make, the amount you'll make per royalty, divide that by 25.
Yes.
And then that's the max
starting one.
That's your max per click.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And then
listen, everybody who stayed to the end of this conversation, you're welcome. Go ahead, Chris.
That's your starting point. And you start with an amount of money that you're willing to gamble. It's an experiment. And you've got to be willing to accept you could spend $100, $500, $1,000 and sell no books, which is entirely possible. So you've got to start with how much are you willing to spend to learn whether ads are going to work for you. And I suggest $300 is a good price point because you can go for a month at $10 a day. You'll spend $300, and if you sell no books at all, you can cancel the experiment. You haven't lost your shirt. But when you start paying this money, you get something in return. Even if it's not book sales, you get data. And data tells you how to change and manage your ads. And it tells you whether you're in a crazy competitive book environment. I wouldn't want to be in the categories your books are in, Robbie, because it's hyper competitive and ads cost a fortune. If you're in a really small niche, ads are cheap, but you've got a small audience. So there's all these trade-offs. But pick an amount of money, call it $300 is a good starting point. $10 a day is your budget. And then you start getting data. And where in the example we said 25 clicks equals 1 sale, the data will tell you if that's right. Is it actually 32 clicks or is it 7? And if it's 7, boy, you can not only are you going to make a whole bunch of money off that, but you can start spending more on your ads and getting better placement. But you get data which helps you make informed decisions about what to do next.
And even if you're hiring somebody else to do all of this, this is the kind of information that the entrepreneur, the business owner should have as they're hiring somebody so they can test whether or not it's being productive. I should not have spent a whole year giving someone my money. But a trusted person suggested them. And I was like, I don't know anything. And I didn't know how to evaluate the results. And yes, it is true that business books in the US, it's a very difficult market to be in. I'm hoping my next book, which is going to be, book launching, might be a little bit more of a subset that I'll be able to do some magic, which is partly why I'm like, ooh, this is interesting. I wanna go back to this as I work on the next book. Because I agree with you, this idea of experimentation and trying new things. I'm still thinking about things for my first book. I mean, why not? I wanna
You wrote
keep
a
these
great
things
book.
out there.
And
Yeah.
it's still, as long as the book isn't time bound. If you wrote the prediction of what's going to happen in 2019, well, that book's got a 1 year
Yeah.
at best shelf life.
Yeah.
If you're writing a business book and you're still talking about Enron, please don't get some new examples. But even better, don't use time bound examples.
Mhm.
One of the reasons that I'm so pleased with a choice I made when writing the first minute is there is only one reference to one organization, and that's NASA. And I'm pretty certain NASA is going to be around for a while, but I didn't use time-bound or named business specific examples because they date. They
Mhm.
become out of date, which means I'd have to update the book. And quite honestly, I don't want to. It's selling. I don't want to touch it. I don't even want to touch the cover in case I break something. Like it's selling. I just want to leave it as it is.
Yeah.
And that's such an important decision when writing the book in the first place. Is it what's called an evergreen book, or have you really anchored yourself in a period of time where something is going to get really dated?
I had this trick when I was working on my third book because it's about Zoom, and my workaround was that it's about the strategies of facilitation and design principles. And yes, it's about the specific buttons that are on Zoom, but the buttons change. The button changed while I was writing the book. Buttons were changing, locations of buttons, what they were
Amen.
called. But you could take the principles from the book and apply it to any virtual platform, and a lot of it even in person, if you're like trying to design a thoughtful event. So in that sense, it's more evergreen, but it's definitely going to be more dated than a book about conference networking, which was
Yeah.
very universally, now that book went out of fashion for a few minutes there during the pandemic, but then it came
When
back.
meeting real people went out of fashion for a few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah, the whole in-person thing. The fact that we had to qualify, I say, "Oh, I wrote about networking at events," before we had to qualify that as saying in-person events, like, before
Mm.
we said that. So in a minute, I'm gonna ask you for, your best advice, and which could be something you repeat from earlier or something brand new you haven't said yet, for someone who's writing a book to help them grow their business. But first, a quick word
Mm.
from our sponsor. All right, lay it on me, Chris. I'm writing a
Okay.
book. This is my first book. I really want to like make a name for myself and build this brand. What should I be thinking about?
It's during the writing process, find the 5 books that you love that are in a similar genre and study their style, how they're constructed. Do they start each chapter with a story or do they dive straight into the detail? Because there's a reason you love those books and find them valuable. So don't take the 5 books you love in an appropriate genre for your book and find out why you love them and how they are structured, and then build your book around that.
I
Because
love
then
this.
you are not starting from a blank page.
Yeah, it's like the same advice if you're about to redo your website. You would go and make a Pinterest board of all the websites you like, and you'd pull apart what do you like about it. Never heard someone say that for the design and flow of a book. But since a book is a blank canvas, and often that's the most daunting part, is you're like, I don't know. And I remember looking at Dory Clark's books a lot when writing my first book. And I was struggling with how to organize the sections or chapters. And everybody told me, well, it's before, during, and after the event because it was about networking at conferences. But I said, well, but like follow up is about knowing before you go there who you want to talk to and tracking the cards that
Yeah.
you collect while you're there and having already set aside time after. Like there was this like, what? So it ended
Yeah.
up being looking at how she structured her books. I realized that I had a different way of approaching it. So strategic, effective, and inclusive networking was like the 3 sections: strategic, effective, and
Nice.
inclusive.
So you still had the rule of 3, it was still organized, but the book and the information and the data within it helped inform the structure.
Yeah.
But seeing, I love the Pinterest comparison you did. When you go painting your house, doing your website, you go and get inspired by what exists already.
Yeah,
And
kitchen
it's not,
cabinets, anything, right?
oh yeah. And this isn't just at the structure high level. This is in the chapter. I did this with the first minute. I had my the business books I liked. In fact, so I wrote the book when we were in this year of disruption and travel, and I had a very limited amount of space. But I spent, because we lived with only what we could fit in our car for 12 months. But I had, in my very small amount of space, I had 5 or 7 books that I was using to model and inform what I wanted in the first minute. And I would go through each chapter and say, does it start with a story, with an intro, with a quote, with a case study? Like, what is the beginning of the chapter? What is the end of the chapter? And I went through every book and every chapter and said, is it the same? Do they change throughout the books? I dissected and analyzed the structure page by page, the structure within a chapter. Are they all the same? And then I found the things I liked and I didn't like, and I made conscious choices, which helped. I realized I hadn't got enough engaging sort of examples or stories in a whole section of my book. And I only realized that after going through this process. So it's
You are built different, I have to say, Chris. I love it. It reminds me that it's possible to do this like thoughtful. I mean, I have a little of this in me. I feel like you're sort of to the nth degree. I was at a conference. I was working my first layout design person. I got them from Upwork. They were designing in Word, which in itself is not horrible. It can be done well.
Yeah.
But I was like, why is this in Arial? It's a print book. And then I found an app on my phone to create a ruler, and was going up to books in the exhibitor hall and measuring the gutter and the margins to report back to her what size I wanted it to be based on the size of my book, because she was not taking that into account, because my book was not 6x9. It was more like a 5x8. It was like, yeah, I was like totally down to the weeds. Like,
you've got to, it's the difference. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, it was all of those things. But even now I can pick up a book and just touching the cover and flipping it over, I can tell, by what's not on the back cover that it was self-published. And
self-published or not.
Don't want that. I want to have the dollar amount in the barcode and spelled out on the book. I want the placement for where we go in a bookstore to show. I want a URL. I want on the spine an image from a publisher. So my third book, I have a nearby street, Wordsworth Lane. So it's Wordsworth Lane Press. And
nice. That's the way to do
found
it.
A WL.
As close to a proper press as you can.
Yeah.
And just like you, I can tell when a book is self-published. And one of my goals, which I failed on, it was a goal and I did not meet the goal. My goal was to make the first minute look like a traditionally published book. And it doesn't. There are enough small discrepancies that makes it not as good a quality as a traditionally published, going through a publishing house book. When I get around to doing the second edition, it will still be self-published, but it will look like it came from Wiley, Penguin Random House, because of like all the gutters, all the type font, all of those little details, picking a different paper quality. There's a lot of things that in the moment I just made the decision. So I was like, oh, I've written the book, I need to get it out. Pick this. The book turned up and I didn't think, well, maybe I should actually do 3 different paper types and see which one I like the best. And I didn't do any of that. I just wanted to rush to get this self-published book out.
Non-title page that's like the image from the cover and nothing else. Like, I don't know why it's there.
But it's meant to be there.
But the traditional publishers have it. Like, I would tell people all the time, like, pick up a bunch of books that are traditionally published in your house and flip through them. So I guess I am more like you than not.
Yeah.
All right, listen, this has been amazing. How can people find you and follow your work? You're awesome.
Oh, thank you, Robbie. You can find me at chrisfenning.com or come and find me on LinkedIn. That's my social hangout. And so far I've answered and replied to everyone who's messaged me. So if you've got a question, let me know. I'm happy to point towards different pieces of advice or answer any questions myself if I can.
That's awesome. I will put all these links to all your books, to your website, to your LinkedIn, and your YouTube, all at bizbookpublishinghub.com, which is also where all the listeners will find all these experts that work with entrepreneurs to help them become successful authors. They'll learn about the events that I host for writers and authors to get together a network that are free, by the way. And 3 times a year, I organize the Kindle cross promotion campaigns, which is a great way for business authors to get their books out into the world. Another fun experiment that I've been testing and playing with. So check it all out at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Chris, thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you for having me.